Okay, so I just wanted to focus on cultivating local power. I think we all have done it. This presentation, parts of it might be quite rudimentary for some of you, but the fact is that cultivating local power requires that we have, we make connections in our local environment, as Shamaka and Mel pointedly, highlighted. Power, individual power comes from inspiration, but collective power comes from organizing. So there's a lot that we have to do in order to make connections with the people who share our issues and want to solve the problems that we experience. So right off the bat, I think we all agree that we live under local, national, and global oppression. So accepting that, it can be overwhelming for most of us, at least when we started out on our journeys in activism and organizing. So taking a step into our own streets and trying to change these circumstances by building up and out of our communities and streets and schools and county buildings and city halls, I think it's really what's valuable. So what I love to do is ask these really specific questions and try to get more and more specific as you go along. And one of the things that I'm curious about is what types of local decisions are impacting you and your communities. So I want to take a moment and have you drop in the chat just the first gut reaction thing that tells you a very specific local decision that actually is making an impact, is making life harder, it's making it more difficult. That would be really awesome to see. So go ahead, let's take a minute and have all of you just take the first thing that comes to your mind and drop it, and then keep going from there. Thank you. Yeah, increased power of mayor. Parking, definitely. That's a daily hazard here in San Jose. Land use, housing, keep them coming. I mean, when you wake up in the morning, what is it that kind of strikes you as this is a pain? If I were in charge, I would change this. What is it that we all want to do if we're in charge, right? Yeah, economic and racial disparity for sure. So really the questions are, how is our daily lives really affected? And loss of trees, we're losing green spaces and oxygen with it. Yeah, trees for sure. And so many empty houses and unhoused people, right? Thank you. Keep them coming, because I'd love to save the chat and actually start building a list, which I've started with the help of our team, and talk about these. So really some of the things that I did was I went around and asked 6 people. Of course, granted, those are people that work in this space with me on various efforts, and asked them about their daily issues. So here are some of the things they come up with. Like, are there free urgent care clinics in your city? Does your city provide cooling and warming centers for unhoused neighbors? Do our schools offer free and enriching after school programs? Does our cities have a free college? Do they issue stipend for students? Are the libraries open late at night? Because they're closing them down and shortening their hours in a lot of our cities. Has our city implemented a zero traffic fatality policy? This is pretty critical because it happens that bicyclists keep getting hit in my city. Does your county have a free, accessible, and clean energy public transportation? These, I hope, demonstrate that the more specific we can make our demands and our issues, the more specific can be the actions that we demand of our local representatives. So this is a really good example of, having having these issues, and they're at a very granular level. And we can really funnel this, funnel housing crisis, this is a national issue, into granular steps that we can demand be taken and we can force be taken. So really, when the question comes up, but who holds power over your local decisions, Shumako and Mel really demonstrated that, there is collective power that we can gain. That's in the organizing space. But really, we should be the ones who are yielding this power over our local decisions. But the fact is that on a daily basis, your county supervisors, your council members, your district attorneys, they're making some really critical decisions on our behalf. So our question is, do they even know what our communities need? Are they present in our communities enough? And even if they are they hearing from us? Who in our communities is reaching out to these local office holders and working with them on addressing these problems? And it's interesting because as advocates and activists, we often find ourselves in a very adversarial, antagonistic position with a lot of our elected folks, unless we elected them. And even then, that may happen. But the fact is that their unions, their community organizers, their other activists and groups, not even nonprofit organizations, neighborhood association, commissions, school boards, they're all having issues and hurdles and challenges in common with us. We actually share a lot of the same concerns. And even if we don't agree on the politics of these groups, we can agree on an issue and move forward on that issue. And that goes the same with a lot of the government agencies that Mel had highlighted in her slides. So how do we really strategize for pressure? This is interesting because we of course have other ways of pressuring better representation, right? We actually, the number one way that our parties and even, unaffiliated, non-party affiliated activists think of is let's elect people that will do what we want, that share those values, see those hurdles, have experienced those challenges. So, let's elect corporate free progressive candidates to local office. We know that within the Democratic Party, that hasn't really been successful at a state level, but, then we move into how do we cultivate that local power, which I think Shumako and Mel really represented well. So this is pretty rudimentary. Like, it sounds simple. I know there's a lot of organizing behind it, but stepwise, we find others who share our concerns and challenges. We build relationship with these local representatives. Guess what? We hired them, even if we didn't vote for them. And they need to be reminded that they're accountable to us. Do they know us? Do we call them once a month and say, hey, how's it going? What's your staff working on? They need to be educated by us to understand how overwhelming some of these challenges are in our communities. The fact is, not many people contact their local representatives. City council members don't hear from a wide range of people. They may hear from very specific, staunch lobbyists. Maybe there's one environmentalist who calls them and they know each other by first name, but they need to hear from more of us. Easier said than done, because a lot of us really don't have the bandwidth and the privilege of time to do that. But that's why we join groups. So really organizing their constituents to put pressure on office holders is really how we make those links of people. Again, working sometimes with organizations, and we may not agree on every political issue, but if they support an eco-socialist program, we do need them. So the question is, how do we demand? We got to demand repeatedly and forcefully and put a lot of pressure. And finally, there are a lot of resolutions, and the whole idea of articulating it and really granularizing our demands to very specific things is because then we can hold office holders to support a very, very specific thing. And that can be in the form of a resolution. It can be in the form of a memo. It could be asking them to join us at a press conference and publicly get on the record to actually support a policy or even an idea, because then we can get back to them and say, hey, you did tell us last month that you supported this. Here's a specific bill that we think you should endorse and support. So finally, when you know that people are standing in the way of good policies, it is our obligation. Not only are we allowed to do it, it is our obligation to shame and blame them publicly and hold them accountable, especially when they have claimed that they support a policy and they don't end up supporting it. So really, I want to go into a couple of examples of what has worked in this process, how this kind of coalition building and connecting various groups, bringing them under an umbrella of an issue has worked. Do we have justice in banking anywhere in the US? No, we don't. So, this is a success with an asterisk, but what happened with public banking was that a group of amazing organizers came together. David Cobb has been part of this group, and he can certainly speak to this. And they really pushed. It was, I'm sure it's been years, decades in the making, but a very specific 4-year campaign was built by the coalition, by the California Public Banking Alliance, and their coalition to push for very specific bills. So AB 857 was a California bill that passed the Assembly and Senate, and it was highly supported by this coalition that this group built. And it essentially just enabled creation of public banks. And then AB 1177 was another assembly bill that passed that allowed a form of a public bank to be created called Cal Account. And this kind of rode the wave of a lot of the COVID funding that became available during COVID. So now $4 million was funded to create this, this way for people to actually use for free banking services. So this was a kind of a parallel effort with what the post office advocates have been pushing, which is postal banking, which would be another free banking for the unbanked residents of California. So it wasn't a super local effort in terms of having a city do something like that, because it is a bigger project, but really how they did it was through building partners and coalitions. They really went an all-out campaign to individuals, community organizers, and really local municipal and counties, and asked that they form these resolutions. And I've dropped this in a common member working folder in a form of a PDF, so you can click on these links and learn more. But there were many of these resolutions that supported enabling creating public banking solutions. Public banking in its most successful rendition or imagination at this point may be a large city or a county or a region of multiple cities and counties coming together to form their own public bank. The campaign actually ended up authoring and sponsoring the bills. This was a big hurdle that a lot of representatives or assembly members aren't going to take. You need that organization that has expertise to write these bills, but built these relationships, handpicked sponsors and authors, and then they move forward who really did propose them. Now, if you just look at the resolution side of the campaign, a lot of them are not really actionable. They're kind of toothless. A city could say, hey, we like to support public banking, but they're not going to be able to create one. But they really do offer this possibility of education outreach. They're the perfect excuse for us to talk to our neighbors and all of these organizations who may have nothing to do with finance and banking, but would benefit from public banks and getting people on the record. So essentially what they did was they ended up having hundreds of organizations in 17 cities and counties to endorse and support public banking legislation. And there are at least 4 cities, there are more than that, who are getting on the effort to actually create public banks within their own jurisdiction and regional area. The people who, sorry, there's a misspelling, it's at East Bay Public Bank. The group that really started this were early on, has been Oakland and Berkeley groups that created East Bay Public Bank. And also Los Angeles has been pretty successful in this. And again, David has been involved for many years in this effort, and he can definitely speak to this. So this is, I would consider this a success of mobilizing locally in order to achieve something pretty significant. Now, another example is could be single payer and Medicare for all healthcare systems. This is a work in progress. Again, I report on California because these efforts, a lot of it has been, I've been involved with in California. But when you think about California as a state can truly support and manage a single payer healthcare because we have the size and the capacity and the budget. But when you realize that since 1918, there's been 19 single payer Medicare for all bills that have been killed in California, it really does demonstrate it's the political will that's blocking that progress. So since 2018, there's been Medicare for all resolution has been started, which is really interesting in this concept that they went for municipal and kind of local resolutions. So they've had over 100 cities passing these supporting resolutions. They created a whole work kit, and this is a really great resource among a few other places where we can apply the methods, the techniques, the material, the resources and training they've created on creating our own solution on entirely different sources. So I'm really happy to include this Tools for Activists by Medicare for All resolution. It's a terrific kind of a training process. Probably each of our organizations, or as potentially even as Jan, we could pull together a training process based a lot on this material. So it's a pretty awesome way to get started on, whatever the issue of interest is for folks. So Mayors for Medicare for All was another effort that started. They recruited 19 mayors to support Medicare for All. This is a way for candidates to also put their, kind of get their policy out there. There are a lot of questionnaires and petitions and pledges that different organizations offer for candidates and office holders to do. Another one is the Physicians for National Health Program, who are also staunch supporters of single payer, who have launched this stopping the privatization of Medicare through a Trump era policy that Biden has continued, which is privatizing Medicare through direct contracting entities. And finally, there is a California Nurses Association has been the author of a lot of these bills that have been killed, but they also have a pledge for candidates and office holders, again, somewhere for people to commit. And really, every pressure counts. Terms. So the single payer advocacy that I've been involved with in Santa Clara County has done a lot of those things. This is City Hall at the top right corner. We bring out these letters and remind people that this affects us. We've worked with Ash Cholera on the left, who's at the podium, who is the author of the latest killed single payer bill. We found Magdalena Carrasco, who is way to the left of that picture, who's a council member and supported and championed the resolution for San Jose City Council to support single payer in totality, at every level. We've petitioned and lobbied against and protested against an issue on the lower right, who is the largest recipients of insurance money in Congress, one of our local folks, and Evan Lowe, assembly member, who also has refused to support single payer. We've called out assembly members like Mark Berman who is not supportive. And in this little organization, we've created endorsement opportunities for folks who are supporting it. So these are kind of the actions and the how-to that we can learn and put pressure on folks. So how is my time check? About 15 minutes in. I wanted to keep a lot of time, so
20 minutes in, sorry.
Okay, terrific, just in time. So really the question becomes, what's your issue? What are things that are important to you and your community? We have examples right on this call of amazing folks who've done this work. Participatory budgeting, you know, Mel can speak to that with her campaign at Chico about trying to get participatory budgeting by simply showing up and inviting people to come and express their opinion about where should our budget be spent. That's powerful because that makes communities come together. So there are organizations that are working on this. In this case, 40 cities have launched a participatory budgeting project. Community Land Trust. Margaret can speak to this. This is what's really important in a state, in a city that actually has implemented a lot of this, and you know, the lessons learned from those efforts. Pesticide use. I know Peter Schwartzman was with us, who was you know, mentioning that as a city council member, he was approached about this, and it was an easy sell to his city council. But what impact it makes on every child that plays on those city parks. Fossil fuel divestment. This is something that lots of campaigns are promoting, and really putting cities and pension funds like our California CalPERS and CalSTRS, our California Retired Employees funds, on the record to demand that they divest from fossil fuels. Declaring a climate emergency, a free city college, you know, and others, decriminalizing poverty, social housing, displacement bans, you know, banning cash bail, rooftop, you know, solar rebates. There's lots and lots of issues that our communities can benefit from that really matters in terms of, you know, convincing a local small group of people who are making those decisions on our behalf. All of these things can be helped and promoted and implemented by our cities. And finally, I just wanted to share this resource. It's a very simple table that I've put some of these links that I've showed you in. It is linked under this local demands, and it's a you know, editable worksheet. If you have those resources, and I know you do because you're at the forefront and doing this work, please add it. We can build on this. And I hope that we inspire many others to join us in our field of dandelions. So we got to displace that capitalist grass.